hope that this was a good test of him as far as, especially if it goes as you and I think, that Hoyer ends up starting week 1. I think it's a good test of proving to your coach and to your general manager that what you guys do, I'm going to let you do. I'm going to hold you responsible. But, that I think goes a long way to showing that he doesn't have his finger on, say a position battle like this.
Yeah, and it's never a good idea, and it actually happens more than you think in the NFL, and that there will be pressure from higher up in the organization to play a particular player. I think that's going on right now in New York, for instance, with the Jets. I think you have a head coach in Rex Ryan who, people saw signed an extension, but if you really look at that extension, it's basically just 1 year.
Yeah.
Of guaranteed money, and the Jets can kind of move on with little financial hits. So, to me, he's got to make a run towards a wild card berth, and I think he would feel more comfortable with Michael Vick as the starting quarterback. But the long-term philosophy of the general manager there, John Idzik, is that he drafted Geno Smith. It was his first draft as the head of the New York Jets. It was a second-round pick. He wants him to succeed. Just like we talked about with any general manager.
Yep.
So I think you saw it in Minnesota last year. I don't think there's any doubt that Leslie Frazier knew Matt Castle was the best quarterback he had, but he wasn't allowed to play him because the general manager there, Rick Spielman, drafted Christian Ponder with the 12th overall pick. And he was kind of forcing him down his throat, and it hurt him, and it eventually cost Leslie Frazier's job. So it happens more often than you would think, and especially at such a high-profile position.
Yep.
And there's going to be pressure in Cleveland this year at some point with Hoyer starts, because the minute things go badly, and I don't mean losing 4 games in a row. I mean a bad half.
Yes.
People are going to be calling for Johnny Manziel. Yeah, 2 interceptions. So there's going to be a ton of pressure on Mike Pettin.
I agree with you 150% as far as that, and I think he knows that. You could hear that the other day in his latest presser when he mentioned that I don't want the guy who wins the job to feel comfortable like it's mine for the rest of the season, but at the same time, I got to make sure that this guy doesn't feel like if I throw a bad pass, there's going to be somebody looking over my shoulder ready to pull me out of the game, because that can be counterproductive too. And it doesn't matter if it's Manziel or Hoyer, either way, it is a fine line. But in some regards, and I know the old expression that when you got 2 quarterbacks, you got none. In some regards, though, I do like the attempt to keep both guys on their toes once the season starts, and I don't think you have to do. I think maybe that's so much for each guy, because Hoyer knows, he refuses to sell. I will give him credit that he went to the Bill Belichick school of media preparation, because he won't sell a single thing for Johnny Football in these press conferences, man. He doesn't acknowledge anything. He just go, look, man, nope, I don't pay attention to it. This is my job, man. I don't know what you're talking about. I get a kick out of it, because a lot of guys would be a lot more jittery, a lot more shook up by the pressure, but he's just like, look, I don't care. But you could tell that from the media and how to talk and deal with them, you can see exactly where he came from, because he's just like him. He's just like those guys.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, he doesn't have that same kind of cachet. I always say, coaches are often their worst enemies when, dealing with the local media, especially. Maybe a little syrup goes a long way occasionally. Whereas, if you're Bill Belichick and you have that history, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. But if you're a young coach, if you're in your first chance, it's very difficult to be combative, as you'll see Belichick, as you'll see at times, you'll see Jim Harbaugh extremely combative in San Francisco, but he's made it to 3 straight NFC championship games, completely turned that franchise around. Those kind of guys can get away with it. It's a little more difficult for guys that don't have the proven track record yet. So, as you know, the preseason, for as much as you're under the microscope in the preseason, it really amps up when the regular season starts. And that's when it's really going to be a test to see how he handles the media, because that's part of it. And obviously, there's more media around the Browns than usual because of Manziel, and the questions are not going to stop. Even if they're 4-0, the questions are not going to stop.
No.
They could be 4-0, and Hoyer will throw 2 picks, and they'll say, well, he could have done better. He could have, he left that on the field. When's Johnny going to play? It's not going to stop, and it'll be interesting to see how he handles it.
Oh no, I talked to some friends about this over the off season, and I said, now obviously I'm dreaming ahead of the end of the season, but I'm like, that I can already see, because this is a Cleveland scenario. I can already see it a year in advance. The Browns have been searching for a quarterback since 1999. Been to the playoffs once. They'll go, 9-7. They'll win a wild card spot or something. And first time in a decade, they go to the playoffs. And Hoyer will be the guy from 1-16 that gets them 9-7 to the playoffs. And only in Cleveland will the first comments in the offseason be, all right, it's Johnny football time. And I'm like, because that's the way it works. And I'm like, but how can that happen? But no matter what, best case scenario for him, I keep joking, unless he wins the Super Bowl. I mean, he's in such I can't win in the end. I can win the battles, but I don't think I can win the war unless I win the Super Bowl. Like you said, he's got to ball out and just go. But I wasn't talking about Penton. When I was talking about the media, I was referring to Brian Hoyer. I mean, he went to that Belichick and Brady school of I don't sell for the competition. I'm not gonna acknowledge anything. I'm straight ahead focused. That's what I mean, because they try to bait him with the like they hit him the other day. They said, well, eventually it's gonna be Johnny's job, right? And he goes, no, why would I know that? Because there's not a single person that's told me that yet, so I don't know what you're talking about. Next question, And very straightforward. I dig that, because a lot of guys, like I said, would be shook up. Hey, outside of the quarterbacks, because we could do this forever, and it's the fun thing for people to talk about and all of that, but there's a lot of other stuff going on here, position battles, because quick turnaround for the Browns. They've got to make cuts. They've got to get down to 75 by Wednesday morning, I believe it is, and then they want to have things in place for the third preseason game so that they can really get that starting unit together on both sides of the ball. I'm kind of interested to see the defensive backfield for the Browns here, because they're going to play I don't know how long they're going to play against them, but they're going to play against some decent wide receivers over there.
Yeah, a really good skill position group for Washington. If you think about the fact that Deshaun Jackson's there now,
right,
and Pierre Garçon's already really, one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. And they should both be suited up. They're not going to play a ton, so you have to look closely. It's very early in the game to see how those battles play out. But there's other, Washington has a tremendous running game. With Morris, the tight end too. Jordan Reed is a really, really talented guy. So, Washington is in a pretty bad division overall, and I think they have a chance to compete, especially if RG3, sort of goes back to that rookie version as opposed to the sophomore version. But it'll be because they outscore people. Ton of issues on the defensive side of the ball, so it'll be a good chance for both Hoyer and Manziel to get some things going, because there's not a lot of difference makers on Washington's defense.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and Justin Gilbert, looking at back to the Browns there, that's the first chance to get a look at him, and like you said, going to be out there against a good group of skill position guys. That's going to be a good test, and I'm interested to see, too, defensively for the Browns against RG3 during whatever time he's out there, how much familiarity there may be. I don't know how much carryover there is in Washington from the offenses, but practicing against the Manziel version of Shanahan's offense, because we know he's kind of working two different types of offenses, a lot more pistol and shotgun stuff with Johnny and a lot more drop back stuff with Brian Hoyer. But going to be interesting to see too, because if the Browns defense may be a bit more prepared for that, because they've had some more exposure to it in practice.
Yeah, I mean, I would put more, thought into that for a regular season game.
Oh, yeah.
As I said before, I would be stunned if either of these teams game planned at all for this game. So you're going to see very vanilla stuff, especially defensively, where you just kind of line up and see what guys can do. As I said before, in those individual battles, you look at, can the left tackle handle the best pass rusher on the field? You mentioned Justin Gilbert. Can he jam those receivers on the line? Can he handle them downfield? You look more for those types of things because it's not going to be any outrageous schemes or anything you're going to see in week one. The only preseason game with any of that, and there's even very limited, would be week 3. But here it's just about looking at individual players and seeing how they do that handle those one-on-one matchups and seeing how that develops.
That's what I meant. I don't mean per se game planning. I just mean lining up against a team's, best guys, whether it's for just the first quarter or not, just speed, seeing if the Browns are able to get the corner on the occasion when the quarterback gets out there, if they do get RG3 loose, if they're able to close the gap or, if they get gashed, things like that. That's more what I meant. You're right. I mean, obviously you're not going out here trying to win the game per se, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you and I are on the same page, just talking a slightly different language, but it's going to be, very interesting to see how a lot of this shakes out. And, so many people worried about how they're going to count the reps with the quarterbacks and stuff. I believe that that's not really going to be in the Browns' consideration on this at all because they realize that you have no control. You can't walk over to Washington sideline and go, hey, do me a favor. Can you keep your starters out there a little bit longer? So unless they were, and I don't think they had any interest in going every other series. Mike Pettin said that's counterproductive. So for a lot of people, they're going to split. I don't know. Do you think that I don't think the Browns are going into this with any attempt of we're going to go 2 series with this guy and then 2 with that. When Hoyer's done, he's going to be done, and then it'll be Manziel. Whatever point that is, it is. And I don't think they're going to necessarily go out of their way to change that.
Yeah, and that's how you have to handle it. You have to get your work done. So that's how NFL coaches think. They're not even paying attention to the other side, to tell you the truth. They go in, they formulate a plan as far as repetitions go, and that's for everyone from the quarterback down to the the third string linebacker. They have a plan in place, and it doesn't matter if your first team is against their second team or vice versa, or it's your second team against their third team. You just have to go into it with the mentality that you're going to get your work done, and you're not overly concerned with who Washington's going to have out there in a particular time. It's about evaluating your own players, sort of like a self-scout, as opposed to a regular season game, which would be game planning to win. Really, what you're doing in any preseason game, even the third one, is self-scouting more than anything else. So you're not really concerned about who's on the field for the other team. You just want to get your work in, and you want to develop your plan. And generally, there's never any reason to go away from it in the midst of a preseason game.
No. And speaking of the plan and quarterbacks, for those of you that don't know, unless something crazy happens, Mike Pettin doesn't expect to even get Rex Grossman into the game, most likely, just because I think he's got, 2 practices? Maybe. Not even 2 practices under his belts here with the team. Not that he necessarily needs it, but Connor Shaw has gotten, he's put the work in throughout camp, and I think that's part of it too. I think they know what they've got in Rex Grossman. I think Connor Shaw will probably be the third quarterback here that gets out there, and maybe they'll get Rex Grossman into week 4, but I don't expect. Do you think he play? I don't expect to see him play tonight.
No, yeah, there's no real need to it, and you probably want to look at certainly. Kyle Shanahan knows all he needs to know about Rex Grossman, so it's probably better for him to get a more of a look at Connor Shaw. But he faces an uphill battle, and we talked about that last week. I don't even know why NFL teams carry a third quarterback now.
Right.
Never mind. Obviously, you're not in a situation where you're not going to keep 3 and keep an extra one on the practice squad. So It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But, you know, for a guy like that, it's about getting on tape. It's about flashing for other teams.